In the early morning hours of November 13, 2022, 4 University of Idaho students were fatally unalived in an off-campus residence in Moscow, Idaho. On December 30th, suspect Brian Christopher Koberger was arrested in Monroe County, Pennsylvania, on 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. Prosecutors are seeking the death penalty. A jury trial is currently scheduled to begin on August 11, 2025, in Boise, Idaho. During the fall 2022 semester, 5 female University of Idaho students lived in a rented off-campus residence in the rural college town of Moscow, Idaho. The 3-story home had 6 bedrooms, 2 on each floor. There had not been a homicide in the town since 2015. In the early morning of November 13, 2022, 4 University of Idaho College students were fatally injured in a shared rental home close to campus. 2 female victims, Madison Morgan and Shauna Kernodle, lived in the house. They worked at the same local restaurant. The third, Kaylee Goncalves, had recently moved out of the house but returned to attend a nearby party. The 4th victim, Ethan Chapin, was Kernodle's boyfriend who was sleeping over on the night of the attacks. 2 other female roommates also lived at the house. They were not attacked. Earlier on the evening of November 12th, 2 of the 4 victims, Chapin and Kernodle, were reportedly at an on-campus party at the nearby Sigma Chi fraternity from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. They returned home at 1:45 a.m. that evening. The other 2 victims, Morgan and Goncalves, had gone to the Corner Club, a downtown sports bar, at 10 p.m., from which they departed at 1:30 a.m. A live-streamed video on Twitch by the Grub Truck, a food truck 4 blocks south at Friendship Square, Main and 4th Streets, showed Morgan and Goncalves at 1:41 a.m., chatting and smiling, getting their food 10 minutes later, and leaving to take what the police initially said was an Uber ride home, a trip of about 1 mile. The police later rephrased their statement to say the ride was provided by a private party, arriving home at 1:56 a.m. According to the surviving roommates, the 4 students were home by 2:00 a.m. 7 unanswered phone calls were made from the phone of Goncalves to her former longtime boyfriend, a fellow student, from 2:26 to 2:52 a.m., and 3 unanswered calls were made from Morgan's phone to the same person from 2:44 to 2:52 a.m. These calls were investigated, with the police concluding they did not believe the recipient of those missed calls was involved in the crime. A DoorDash order labeled for Shauna was delivered to the house around 4 a.m. The 2 surviving roommates had allegedly returned home by 1 a.m. Original reports stated both surviving roommates were in their beds on the ground floor at the time of the unalivings, were not attacked or held hostage, and that neither woke during the unalivings. However, the probable cause affidavit for the case said that 1 surviving roommate stated she was sleeping on the 2nd floor, the same floor as Kernodle and Chapin, before she was awakened by what sounded like Goncalves and her dog. She stated she later heard a roommate saying something to the effect of "There's someone here." The roommate stated she believed this was said by Goncalves, although investigators also believe this might have been Kernodle speaking, as a forensic download of her cell phone showed that she was on the app TikTok at 4:12 a.m. The surviving roommate stated she opened her door twice within a short span of time and the second time heard what sounded like crying coming from Coronel's room and a male voice saying, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Security cameras near the home picked up the sound of whimpering, a loud thud, and a dog barking numerous times starting around 4:17 a.m. The surviving roommate allegedly opened her door a third time and saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered his mouth and nose walking towards her. The man, whom the roommate stated she did not recognize, walked past her and used the sliding glass door to exit. The roommate stated she stood in a frozen shock phase and then locked herself in her room. The 4 victims were unalived by knife on the 2nd and 3rd floors in the residence where they had been in bed. The victims were not gagged or restrained, and the walls at the scene were spattered with blood. Morgan and Goncalves were found in Morgan's bedroom, and Carnadal and Chopin were found in Carnadal's room. Before the 911 call was made, the surviving roommates reportedly summoned friends to the residence because they believed one of the second-floor victims was unconscious and was not waking up. Someone at the residence called 911 at 11:58 a.m. over 7 hours after the homicides allegedly occurred on a surviving roommate's phone to request aid for an unconscious person. All 4 victims were pronounced deceased at noon. Detectives stated they believe the unalivings occurred sometime between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. Upon searching the residence, officers came upon Goncalves' dog, which she shared with her ex-boyfriend, alive and unharmed on the 3rd floor. 4 University of Idaho students were unalived. Ethan Chopin, age 20, of Conway, Washington. Kaylee Goncalves, age 21, of Rathdrum, Idaho. Shauna Carnadal, age 20, of Avondale, Arizona. She later lived in Post Falls, Idaho. And Madison Morgan, age 21, of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Chopin was a freshman, Carnadal was a junior, and Goncalves and Morgan were both seniors. On the evening of November 13th, the university canceled classes for November 14th. It also scheduled a candlelight vigil to be held on the UI Administration Building lawn on the evening of November 16th, then postponed it 2 weeks. From the day of the killings, investigators initially said that there was no risk to the community. 3 days later, however, Moscow Police Chief James Fry said, "We cannot say that there is no threat to the community." Fall break was scheduled to begin after November 18th, with classes resuming on November 28th. Many students and other Moscow residents, not trusting the initial assurances of the police and fearing for their own safety, began an early Thanksgiving holiday exodus from the area. Other residents who stayed were anxious and cautious, and a number of professors canceled their classes. Due to weather concerns, the candlelight vigil was moved indoors to the Kibbe Dome and held on the evening of November 30th. The fathers of Goncalves and Chopin criticized the limited flow of information from the police and university to the families of the victims. Self-proclaimed psychics and social media users began to speculate and spread rumors and misinformation about the case on social media. Moscow Police Captain Roger Lanier said, "Tracking down rumors and quelling rumors about specific information and specific events that may not have happened is a huge distraction. We are not releasing specific details as we do not want to compromise the investigation." They also warned that people harassing or threatening those potentially involved with the case could face criminal charges. The investigation of the unalivings was led by the Moscow Police Department and supported by the Idaho State Police and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Altogether, almost 130 members of law enforcement from the three agencies worked on the case. Autopsies on the 4 victims were performed in Spokane, Washington. The Latah County coroner stated the victims all appeared to have been impaled multiple times with fatal wounds in the chest and upper body with a large knife, if not the same knife, very similar ones. At least one victim with what were apparently defensive wounds on her hands, and possibly more appear to have tried to fend off their attacker, and the victims may have been attacked while sleeping in their beds. None showed signs of sexual assault. All 4 deaths were deemed homicide by stabbing. The victims were not tied and gagged. No weapon has been recovered, although the police believe the killer or killers used a fixed-blade knife. A surviving roommate who reportedly saw the suspect described him as a male stranger around 5 feet 10 inches, and not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. On November 19th, Moscow police requested the public provide any video of the house that had been recorded the night of the killings. A phone tip line and email were created through the FBI for the public to submit information to officials. As of December 5th, 2,600 emailed tips, 2,700 phone calls, and 1,000 digital media submissions were reportedly submitted to these tip lines. On December 24th, investigators reported having received at least 15,000 tips regarding the case. The police initially left open the possibility of more than one perpetrator. Police stated that they believed it was a targeted attack, but have not concluded if the target was the residence or its occupants. In a November 23rd press conference, the Moscow police chief said that authorities had received a number of tips, one of which indicated that Goncalves allegedly had a stalker, but were unable to verify that claim or identify any such individual by the time of the press conference. While this claim received much press attention at the time, it has yet to be mentioned in the case against the eventual suspect. After receiving hundreds of tips from the public, on December 15th, police announced they were searching records of approximately 22,000 fifth-generation Hyundai Elantras made between 2011 and 2013. A camera in the area captured video of a white or light-colored Elantra around the time of the murders, which investigators noticed had made multiple passes along the same route near the residence. Another surveillance recording obtained by investigators also showed an Elantra passing by the victim's home 3 times, beginning around 3:29 a.m. At 4:04 a.m., the Elantra returned to the home for a 4th time. At 4:20 a.m., the car was seen speeding away from the victim's neighborhood. Investigators in neighboring Pullman, Washington, a college town adjacent to Moscow, began an investigation into a white Elantra belonging to a 28-year-old Ph.D. candidate and teaching assistant named Brian Christopher Koberger, who drove it with his father home to the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania for the holidays. Koberger's Elantra was of a later year than the original police description. Koberger was pulled over twice within a nearly 5-mile radius by Indiana State Police on Interstate 70 outside Greenfield, Indiana, allegedly for following too close or tailgating. The FBI denied allegations that they had directed the Indiana State Police to make the stops. Investigators obtained cell phone data that showed that Koberger's phone stopped connecting to the network around 2:47 a.m. in Pullman on November 13th before reconnecting around 4:48 a.m. near Blaine, Idaho, which is near the U.S. Highway 95 south of Moscow. Cell phone data also shows that his phone utilized a cell tower near the victim's residence around 9 a.m. on November 13th, approximately 5 hours after the killings. Police also obtained data that indicated that his phone pinged from the cell phone tower nearest the residence at least 12 times between June 2022 and November 13th. Investigators obtained 3 unidentified male DNA samples from the crime scene, including DNA found on a tan leather knife sheath on Moggin's bed. Before the arrest, investigators monitored Koberger outside of his parents' Pennsylvania home. He was allegedly seen multiple times wearing surgical gloves and observed putting trash bags inside of the garbage can of a neighbor. The items were sent to the Idaho State Lab for testing. Authorities also said Koberger had cleaned his car, inside and outside, not missing an inch of area. According to authorities, a search of the home where Koberger was arrested revealed a knife, a pistol, and a black face mask, as well as ID cards inside a glove, inside a box. Koberger was taken into custody by an FBI SWAT team and Pennsylvania State Police on December 30th at the home of his parents in Monroe County, Pennsylvania. At the time of his arrest, authorities allegedly found Koberger in the kitchen dressed in a shirt and shorts, while wearing examination gloves and putting trash into separate Ziploc baggies. Koberger had been a teaching assistant at Washington State University, and less than 2 weeks before the murders, faculty members met with him to discuss growing concerns about his behavior and conduct. Koberger was terminated from his teaching assistant role on December 19th, with the decision being based on his unsatisfactory performance as a teaching assistant, including his failure to meet the norms of professional behavior in his interactions with the faculty, and sexism, being rude to women, including students. On December 30th, 2022, Koberger was arrested on 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 felony count of burglary, was appointed a public defender, and was detained without bond at the Monroe County Correctional Facility in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. On his return to the county courthouse on January 3, 2023, he agreed to extradition. On January 4th, he was flown to Pullman, driven to the Lada County Jail in Moscow, and held without bail. Koberger made his first appearance in the Lada County courthouse on January 5th and was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary for breaking into a home with the intent to commit a felony. 1 week later, on January 12th, Koberger made his second appearance for a status conference in the same room at the courthouse. On May 17, 2023, the Lada County District Court announced that Koberger was indicted by a grand jury on 5 charges, 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. A preliminary probable cause hearing scheduled for June 26th was canceled after the indictment. In May 2023, Koberger refused to enter a plea during his arraignment. His attorney said that Koberger was standing silent on the charges. The judge entered a not guilty plea for him. On June 26th, the Latta County Prosecutor's Office announced they were seeking the death penalty given the alleged aggravating circumstances of the first-degree murder charges. Koberger was denied bond. In January 2024, the judge granted the defense access under seal. The results of the investigative genetic genealogy testing, which used a touch sample from the knife sheath left behind at the crime scene, which first led to the investigation of Koberger. On September 9, 2024, the judge granted the defense's motion for a change of venue. The trial is scheduled to take place in Boise, Idaho, with Judge Stephen Hippler presiding over the case. On October 9, 2024, Judge Hippler set the start date for jury selection as July 30, 2025, with the jury trial beginning on August 11, 2025. On February 24, 2023, University of Idaho President Scott Green announced that the house where the unalivings occurred was donated to the university. It was demolished 10 months later on December 28th. A memorial garden for the victims on the University of Idaho campus is being planned. Scholarships in the name of 3 of the victims, Kernodle, Chopin, and Magen, have been created. The university awarded posthumous degrees to the 4 victims at its spring commencement ceremonies on May 13, 2023.